Welcome to 7th grade social studies for KCS at home. My name is Christy Letzinger and I teach at Gresham Middle School, teach 7th grade social studies, and this is one of my favorite topics. It's all about explorers. We're going to talk about them. Some you know, some you don't know. The first thing I want to do is, if this video is hard to understand or something doesn't make sense, follow the steps on this page. Turn on closed captions, adjust the playback speed, consider watching short clips, or have someone watch it with you. So one of the things that I like to do in my classroom is make sure and hold my students accountable. And what I mean by that is I want them to check off as they go, because if not, they're going to forget a step. If you make a peanut butter sandwich, you don't go straight from pulling the bread out to eating the sandwich. There's steps in there. And if you miss it, you won't have the best sandwich you will ever have. So as you go, make sure that you check off. You can see here, read the passages below, annotate as you read, answer the questions. So the two main standards that we're going to be talking about today, and they are on your paper for KCS at home for this time, is we're going to be talking about why European countries were motivated to explore. We're also going to be talking about why, who from England, France, Spain, and Portugal explored and where they went. So the first thing is I want to stop for a second and I want to think, this of course is a forest, and I want you to think about why you would go exploring. So look at that picture, and some of you may say, oh, I wouldn't explore there, and I understand that, but for those of you that would think, why would you go exploring there? Some of you guys might say, well, to see what there is, maybe to find a particular flower, maybe to see what, if there's a creek in there, or if there's animals in there, or if you could find a bird's nest. And so there's all sorts of reasons to explore, and we're probably each going to have a different one. For me, I might want to go exploring just to take a walk and see what's there. I may not be looking for anything specific. Now, our explorers, if you read that information, however, they were looking for something specific. They were looking for gold. And we talk about gold in this instance, we're talking about riches. They were looking for the riches of the new lands. They were looking for spices and gold and labor and all of these things that they were looking for and wanted to bring back with them to their sponsoring country. They were also, of course, looking for God. Not necessarily looking for God, but they were looking to share God with others. If you remember during this time, the Protestant Reformation, the Catholic Reformation, they were all kind of fighting about who was right. And so all of these countries sent out voyages, and on the voyages would have been missionaries. And those missionaries would have gone and tried to convert the natives to their religion. Majority of these did come from Spain and Portugal, which were Catholic. And so Catholicism was trying to spread its religion to more believers. Of course, explorers were also looking for glory. Think back to that forest, and if you went out and you found a gold nugget, or you found an animal that had never been found before, you wanted to be remembered for it. And so these explorers would go out and try to be remembered for what they did. And the ones we're going to talk about, obviously, were remembered hundreds of years after they did their exploring. So here is my paper. You can kind of see what I've done. I wanted to show you some steps to annotating. So if you took that first paper and you would mark off after you're finished, I went down through and read. I underlined in certain places. You can see things that really stuck out to me. And then I put boxes around those that really made sense because they were highlighted or in parentheses or things that seemed to stand out. I also wrote some notes over to the side. And those were for me to make connections with what I already knew. Now, the answer questions down here said, what are 3 reasons for exploration? What are 2 reasons explorers wanted glory? And then what 1 way did exploration change the world? Now, you're welcome to use my answers. Really don't want you to. I'd really rather you think about it from your own perspective, especially that last one. Why and how did they change the world? Now, as we go on down, our next little section is about the explorers, which we're coming to right now. So let's think historically first off. I know it's really hard to think. We've grown up in an era of cell phones and internet, and basically you can get anything at the touch of a button. However, during this time that we're going to be talking about, Renaissance, post-Renaissance, information didn't travel very quickly. There were no cell phones. There were no GPS, no complete maps because people hadn't explored everywhere. There were no newspapers, no computers, no complete atlases. There was no complete information of the world. And any information that they had to get had to be shared firsthand and shared with others. And then others would make these maps or share the information. And so just keep in mind when you go, well, why didn't they know this? Or why didn't they know that? Or how did they not see? There were no satellite images of anything out there. All of that came much, much later in history, much closer to when we live than it did during the time of these explorers. Now, I do want you to think of explorers that you knew. One, of course, would be Marco Polo, Zheng He from China. You know a few explorers already. Many of you guys are already familiar with Columbus, maybe Lewis and Clark for the United States. So there were a lot of explorers that have helped us shape our world today. As an explorer, this is what you would have seen. This is what you would have seen for a very long time. Maybe some whales, maybe some land once in a while that you would stop at, or maybe that you wouldn't stop at. But this is what you would have seen as an explorer. So exploring was not all fun. There were times they would be on ships for months. They would run out of things to eat. They would be sick. There were a lot of things that happened, and these voyages were very, very long. But the voyages still ended up giving us lots of information about the world and opened up the world to the people who lived during that time and even to us. So I want to just kind of go over a few of these explorers. Here are some explorers. Henry Hudson discovered Canada. Jacques Cartier discovered St. Lawrence River area in Canada. Hernando de Soto discovered the Mississippi River and explored Central America and Peru. Amerigo Vespucci discovered that Americans weren't in Asia and were in fact a new continent. Christopher Columbus believed that we were in the Indies, but he was in East Asia, when actually he was, of course, as we know, in the Caribbean Ocean. Christopher Columbus discovered the Caribbean area. Now, we're just going to look real quickly at a picture and maybe a couple of extra little bits of information, but I just wanted to show you some really quick maps of where they sailed from. Now, this is Henry Hudson here. He sailed from two from England, one from the Dutch or the Netherlands, and you can kind of see his routes here with the Dutch. The English did not like that he sailed for the Dutch at all. As a matter of fact, he was put in jail later and then released to make another journey. But you can see where he sailed here from London. You can see that he went into what is now called Hudson Bay. Obviously, it's named after him. You can also see here that when he sailed for the Dutch, he went way up trying to find a passage and came all the way back down and landed in this area. Now, this area is where New York City is. The Dutch actually settled there later and settled what is now known as New York City. So Jacques Cartier is from France. You can see first and second journey here on the map, France being way over here. And you can see that he actually came into what's now called the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and he actually went into the St. Lawrence River, down in through here. He never lost a ship during his voyages, and that's very unusual. Even during storms, anything else, he was very careful with what he did. This is Canada all in through here, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Labrador. Hernando de Soto is from Spain. He actually came up from the Caribbean, from Cuba, came up into here, joined and met some Native Americans and explored. He was, they believe, the first European to ever see the Mississippi River. And then he comes down in here. He actually died of a fever in the Louisiana area in 1542. Amerigo Vespucci is from Spain. Now, many of you guys wonder, Christopher Columbus, America, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense how we got our name. We got our name from this gentleman right here, Vespucci. He was from Spain. His name was Amerigo, and you can see the similarity between America and Amerigo. Now, the interesting part is he was from Italy, actually, but he went to Spain in order to sail. Now, if you remember the Medici family, some of you guys remember the Medicis. They helped to start the Renaissance in Florence, very powerful family. He actually was a banker for them. And so he knew the Medicis, if that helps you put it in kind of a time and place. So he sailed from Spain again, and he sailed down through the Atlantic Ocean and into the Caribbean. They believe he was one of the first to actually see the Americas. Again, Amerigo, America. Christopher Columbus, we're all very aware of Christopher Columbus. He sailed from Spain, made several journeys, thought he was in the East Asia area, which he really wasn't. He was in Cuba. He was in Hispaniola. He was in this area. Now, again, to kind of tie it together, what you may not know is in Spain at the time, he actually sailed for King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. So you can think about what all you know about their reign in Spain, how they kicked out Muslims and Jews and how they reclaimed it in the Spanish Inquisition. He was not necessarily a part of those events, but he was a part of history in Spain from King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. Now, some more explorers that we're going to briefly touch on. We could spend months on these explorers and find out all about their lives, but our main goal here is to find out kind of what their claim to fame is. You have Vasco da Gama. He discovered a way around the tip of Africa to India. You have Bartholomew Diaz. He discovered a route to the southern tip of Africa. And Ferdinand Magellan was the first to circumnavigate or go all the way around the globe. So this is Diaz. Now, Bartholomew Diaz, which it doesn't sound like a really big feat, but it was. He sailed from Portugal, and he sailed all the way down here and went to the southern tip of Africa. No one had really done that before. They didn't know that it was possible to get from one ocean to the other. So this was going to help them figure out how to get then farther on to India. Vasco da Gama took this and he kind of learned, okay, he also sailed for Portugal, and his journey was about 10 years or so after Diaz's. And so he sailed down, and you can see he went basically to the same place, the Cape of Good Hope, where Diaz went. But he actually was able to sail all the way over to India, to the Spice Island area, and then come all the way back. And that was huge for the time period. Now, our last main explorer is Ferdinand Magellan. You may have heard of him. He actually was the first ship to circumnavigate, or again, go all the way around the Earth. Remember, this map looks a little flat because it is. But if you were on a globe, if you went here, you would come out over here because it would be rounded. So he actually started here in Spain, and he went around the globe. Now, the sad part was Magellan actually did not make it all the way around, and only one of his ships actually made it back, and I believe there were about 18 crew members all that made it back. But he died right in here in a battle with the Native Americans. So he didn't make it, but because it was his ship, because it was his plan, he does get credit for being the one to circumnavigate the world. And I believe in the research I've done, he went about 42,000 miles around the world. So again, think back to that ocean. Think back to the fact that they would not have had the food to eat. There wouldn't have been a lot of fresh food. They would have been stuck on the ship for years at a time. And so it was a very hard thing to do. So all that being said, was very, very quick. I would suggest going back and kind of looking at each one of those routes to help you kind of get a good idea of what those people did. So our next task is to look over our map, of course, which we'll look at here in just a second. Use your pencil to go over the routes for the 8 explorers that we talked about. There are others on there because I wanted you to see that there were plenty of explorers during this time in a 100-year period or so. Complete the trading cards, and I'll show you mine. I'll show you a completed set in just a second. Cut them out. On the back, draw a quick sketch of the route that this explorer took. I'll show you mine, so don't worry. It is not an art project. Then come up with categories on your own and place them down by those categories. And then ask someone at home to do the same thing. Give them a category and say, hey, put these in the categories of who came from France, who came from Spain, who sailed for this person, who did this. All right. And then you can put the cards around the map if you want and kind of draw lines or something to where the routes actually were. So here's the map that's on yours. Mine's in color, of course. And you can see all of these lines. And so my suggestion would be to start with, say, Henry Hudson, and draw his line here with a colored pencil or a dashed line or a dotted line, whatever makes you feel the best, whatever works for you. And here's Magellan. You can see Magellan is this line. Now, I know, again, that there's a lot of lines on there, but I really wanted you to see all of these explorers together and others explorers such as Drake, such as Cabral, and a couple of other explorers that explored during this time as well. So let's complete this task together. I've already completed mine. You may already have. If not, go back again, look, read, look at the maps, think about what we talked about. So here are my completed trading cards. I think it's fun to write in color. It just makes the activity more enjoyable for me. You can see that I have all these out, not in any particular order. De Soto, Vespucci, Hudson, Cartier, da Gama, Magellan, Diaz, and Columbus. Now, on the back, I drew little sketches. Again, I am not an art person. And so these are real quick sketches. Here's Diaz coming from here, going to the southern tip of Africa. Just as a real quick reminder, Columbus coming from Spain and going over here into the West Indies or the Caribbean area. That just kind of helps you put them in place. And so what I did was, one of the questions I did was, which explorers explored the America? Now I use Post-it notes. You don't have to. You can just ask a question and pull those out and put them down, or use a piece of paper, whatever works best for you. But the ones that explored the Americas, DeSoto, Vespucci, Cartier, Hudson, and Columbus. So then I would take all those cards back and I would do a different one. Which explorers sailed from France? There was only one, and that was Cartier. Came from France, explored the St. Lawrence River in Canada. He sailed from France to Canada, and he never lost a ship during his time and never had a major mishap, which makes him one of the most safe or conscientious sailors and explorers during this time. So that's all I really have for you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned quite a bit about the explorers. There's so much more out there. If you have internet access, I would definitely think about looking up some of these guys. They're very interesting. Their backgrounds, what they actually did, what happened when they got there, who they took with them, all of the things that you can learn about them that we just don't have time for in this short video. So hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a lot. Bye.